Oh, a real crowd. This is really nice. Good to see all of you today. And if we keep doing this, we'll have to have people back in the fellowship hall from here on out. That's wonderful. Good to see everybody. Welcome. For those of you online, my name's Dave. I'm pastor here at First Lutheran. We're in Algona, North Central Iowa. A little small community, fairly small congregation, but just a fabulous congregation filled with wonderful people. And so we are glad that all of you are here. And we hope that this worship service will speak to you in a new way. And so I have to tell you, I've been working, and this is the third of sermon in this sermon series. It's called Music with a Message, and I'm using the music of Ben Rector. And by now, if you've been listening at all in the last few weeks, you know who this guy is. My daughters introduced me to him a few years ago, at least his music. I haven't met him personally, although I did send him a note on Instagram saying, "Hey, Ben, listen to my sermons. I'm talking about you." He hasn't gotten back to me yet. But Ben's music, it's secular music for the most part, although there are Christian tones in really in all of it. There's such good music, and so I'm taking some of those songs and trying to see if there aren't connections with the faith. And so today, of course, Ben has this way, while everyone's looking this direction, Ben might be looking back there someplace, or over there, or over here. And we're all looking one direction, and he sees the world in a very different way, and then he shows us that. And today's song is a really good example of just that. The song's about cab drivers. And so, Ben, he's on the road a lot. He does lots of music. He does concerts. He does interviews, all those kinds of things, which means that he sits in a lot of cabs, going from home to the airport, to a motel, to a concert venue, and back again. And so what he's discovered very quickly is that it's pretty awkward sitting in a vehicle with another person for 30 minutes or more and not saying anything. So he started just striking up conversation with the cab drivers, just to be filling the space, just so it wasn't so awkward. And then, with many of them, he started noticing that some interesting things were happening. And the song that you're about to hear is about two of those drivers. One, this guy's name is Danny, and he works in Nashville, which is where Ben lives. And Ben one day was heading to the West Coast to go do a concert, and he called the cab company the night before and said, I've got an early flight. Can we have a cab here by 5:30 in the morning? I know that's early. And the company said, well, yes, of course. So next morning, 5:15, Ben gets a phone call. And the guy on the other end of the line, his name is Danny, and he's the driver. And he says to Ben, he says, listen, I no hurry. I don't want you to rush or anything like that. I just want you to know that I'm here anytime you're ready to go, because I don't want you to be late for your flight. That's pretty impressive. So Ben gets in the cab and starts doing what he does with cab drivers, starts striking up a conversation. And it always starts pretty general and probably most of the time stays that way. But Ben said, so what do you like to do with your free time? And Danny says, well, I don't have a lot of free time because, after my shift with the cab, I go to night school. I want to become a computer programmer. But my English isn't good enough, so I'm going to school to better my English skills so I can go and become a programmer. And then a little bit of silence, and Ben said, well, what do you like to do after that? He said, well, I really like to just get home as fast as I can and hope that I get there before my kids go to bed so I can do homework with them. That's what I like to do. Wow. I mean, Ben is sitting there, and this is just cut right into him. And he notices the contrast between the two of them and how striking it is. I mean, here's Ben. He's a little irritated that he has to get up so early and get in the cab at 5:30 to head off and go sing his songs to a packed house of fans that are going to be wildly screaming his name, and they will adore everything he does. Meanwhile, there's Danny, who gets up every day at the crack of dawn. And by the way, his dress shirt that he wears for work is freshly pressed. And he works a full shift, and then he goes to night school, and then he rushes home in hopes that he can spend a few minutes with his kids before they go to bed. And he loves every minute of it. And nobody knows his name, and nobody adores what he does. The contrast could not be more striking. One other thing I'd like you to notice, the Dannys of the world, we've all met them. Some of you are the Dannys of the world. We have probably sat, some of us, in the back seat of one of their cabs and struck up the same conversation and listened to the same thing. And before we get to the airport ticket counter and weigh our bags, we've already forgotten what he said. Ben, we're all looking up here. Ben's back there, over here, behind that corner. And what he sees is not what's up front. He sees the heart of someone that he's talking to. And he gets the very clear message that he's not half the man of the men who drive him places. So before we go to this video, I'd just like to ask one more question. I'm wondering, how in the world does he know to look back there? Angie, would you please?
Howard drives a minivan with the cruise ships from Fort Lauderdale, and it's been that way since 1994. Does his business on a flip phone with the most obnoxious ringtones. I didn't ask, but I could tell he's from New York. He spoke proudly of his daughter, and that this fall she'd be in college, and that he always wished he got his degree. You could tell he came from nothing, built a future out of hustle, and somehow I'm the one you people pay to see. Oh, isn't that just the way it goes? You dealt a good hand, and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places? Danny showed up early, 15 minutes till 5:30, making sure that I'd be on my morning flight. He said he'd love to fix computers, but that he can't until he's fluent. He spends his driving money taking class at night. He wore a neatly ironed dress shirt, and he helps his kids with homework. And deep inside I couldn't help but ask myself why that night I'm upon the stage, everybody knows my name, then he's early picking up somebody else. Oh, isn't that just the way it goes? You dealt a good hand, and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places? And now everything's not given. I work hard to make a living. I'll give credit where I think the credit's due. Maybe you got dealt a good hand. Maybe you play it the best that you can. But I don't know how far you'd walk without those cards. And Howard or Danny's working shoes. But that's just the way it goes. You dealt a good hand and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places? Of the men that drive me places.
Don't you just want to listen to all this guy's music? It's just amazing stuff. And it's not just melodic and beautiful, but the way he weaves a story, it just takes you by storm. Well, I have to tell you, this lesson that Grace just read. Grace, where are you? Good to have you back. She's been down at my old stomping grounds for all summer, working down there. It go okay? Good, good. I heard some of your sermons. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. So, where was I here? You got me off track, Grace. So, the story that Grace read, it's been something I've been living with for a long time, more than just the last few weeks. And it's one of those stories that I just can't quite wrap my arms around. But before I get there, let's just kind of set the table and get the setting down. This is 1 Kings. It's during the Davidic dynasty, and Solomon's father, King David, the greatest king in all of Israel of all time, has just died. And Solomon, his son, is now stepping into David's shoes and the throne. In the 40 years that David ruled, the people of God prospered like no other time. The country of Israel had become as large as it would ever become. People were doing well, and this was a fabulous king. And now here's Solomon, who's about to take the reins. He is 15 years old. One night, he is laying in bed, and God visits him in a dream. And he says to this 15-year-old boy, Solomon, whatever it is that you wish for, ask, and I will give it. Okay, 15-year-old boy, just about to become king. He could ask for anything, literally anything he wanted. He could ask for riches. He could ask for a long life, and because he's going to be king, he could be asking for victory over all of the enemies that might threaten his country. And all of these would be good and noble things to ask for. And that's just the beginning of the list. Think of all the things he could want. Anything he could ask God, and God would grant. Solomon says to God, he says, Lord, give me an understanding heart. That's what I want. Now, 15-year-old boy knows to ask for that with all the other things that are out there. I mean, most of us wouldn't go there. Most of us would aspire to be giants in the earth, would take full advantage of that opportunity to better ourselves and to make ourselves rich and prosperous and long life and all of those things. Not Solomon. And I have to wonder why. How did he come to that? I mean, was it maybe because he saw that those very tantalizing possibilities, Maybe that they're just sort of the easy and fast way to get something, and it wouldn't work. And that he was wise enough to know, even at that young age, that if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Well, that's a possibility. But I thought maybe there'd be something else, some other explanation. And so I started searching through that story one more time, and I came to verse 8. When you get home, read it. It's an amazing verse. Solomon is responding to God, and he says, you know, God, he says, I've been out among these people, and these people are great. They have changed me. Give me an understanding heart. I think that's so interesting. And I also think that this is not the first time that God has visited Solomon. I think Solomon didn't know that God had been there before. That he came to Solomon in ways that only Solomon could see. And that while everyone else was looking up front, fixated and focused on the giants in the earth, God turned Solomon's head to see the people and the things that no one else would ever notice, because he knew that that would change Solomon. And so maybe it was a conversation that Solomon had with the local baker. He and this baker had grown up together, maybe went to school together, and they've known each other for some time. And so when they sit down and talk, as they often do, they didn't talk about world politics. They didn't talk about the foes and the armies that would threaten. They didn't talk about the economy. Instead, they talked in the ways of friends. One is a baker who makes bread for the neighborhood. The other, a king. And Solomon listened to this very ordinary man who's just doing what he does every day, works hard, raises his family. And somehow it changes him. So maybe it was that. Or maybe it was the woman who was carrying a child on her back that Solomon noticed as he was strolling in the marketplace. And he saw this woman in amongst the crowds and for whatever reason picked her out. And she laid down what money she had on a vendor's table to buy whatever she could to feed that child. And all the while, the child's on her back, tugging on her hair, and they're both laughing together. And Solomon marvels at this woman who just blends in to the rest of the marketplace. While the rest of the world is fixated on the celebrities, on the power, on the status, on the people that are high profile, I believe that God has turned Solomon's head to look in a different direction. This 15-year-old boy who was dealt a good hand and has the adoration of everyone he meets, all the perks, all the privileges. God showed him you and you and you. And it humbled him to a place where he realized that he was not half the man of the people he ruled. So God says to Solomon, ask me anything you would like, and I will grant it. And Solomon thinks and opens his mouth, and he says, Lord, I've been out among these people. They are a great people. Give to me an understanding heart. Would you please sing for us?
When my mind is like a battlefield and my heart is overcome by fear, and hope seems like a ship that's lost at sea.
My enemy is on every side, and I'm tempted to run and hide. Your gentle whisper reaches out to me. Peace holds me when I'm broken, sweet peace that passes understanding. When the whole wide world is crashing down, I fall to my knees and breathe in your peace.
Thank you very much. Let's show our appreciation for the music this morning. So all of this has caused me to wonder. What if the people who have all the eyes of the world upon them, who are celebrated for who they are and what they did, what if, even for a moment, God could turn their head and see things that no one else ever notices? What if presidents and senators, community leaders and public figures, and really even somebody like me could be led to do that, even for a short time? I wonder what it would be like. Now, for me, I will tell you that everybody is facing in this direction, either this way or this way. You're all looking at me. I mean, in terms of the local scene, I am the center of attention here. I don't know why, but I am. And I'd like to show you something else today. Some other people that I know. A woman, a flower who blends into every wall she stands beside. And she's faithful, and she's true. She's always here, never misses. And she stays the course, even though no one ever notices. Or maybe it's the dad who rushes home from work each night or several nights so that he can get to his daughter's middle school music program in time, and he doesn't really like music. And then in the summer times, he schedules his vacation one day at a time so that he can go out into the hot summer sun with no shade and sit on an aluminum bench and watch her play softball. Or what about that single mom who works 2 jobs and draws a paycheck barely half my own? And she sits with sick friends whenever she's called. And she does so with grace and with love. Or the guy who doesn't have much, and he drops a jar of pennies in that green disaster bucket back there. He's been saving those things ever since the big wind in Iowa. Doesn't have much, it's all he has. But he knows that he wants to help somebody who's maybe lost their home. My friends, you're looking at the wrong person. I'm not half the man of those people. or for that matter, any of you who are here today or listening to me now. And no one sees what you do. And no one celebrates you for who you are. But you are being used by God to change the world around you. And if you think those who are celebrated are going to be the agents of that change, think again. Because God has chosen you. You will love the world one person at a time. You will care for each other, person to person, heart to heart. And now, you will pray for those who get celebrated and get noticed and are adored by everyone. Pray for them, that God might turn their heads and see the world in a very different way. Thanks be to God.